Vabbè, dai, ci siamo rotti i coglioni a fare il countdown, c'è abbastanza gente. Ciao carissimo, come stai? L'uomo nella low closet. Però ti sei rimesso lì, è proprio una tradizione. Ciao Marco. Marco Bussi. Allora, dirante, ma cosa cazzo ci fa Boldrin qui? Ma facciamo un po' di anticipazione perché tra 20 minuti, mezz'oretta, se voglio farmi compagnia sei benvenuto, ci sarà Deirdre McCloskey che viene a trovarmi. Sapete chi è Deirdre McCloskey? Con la quale vorrei discutere di questo suo libro.
No idea.
Deirdre McCloskey, formerly Donna McCloskey, but Deirdre McCloskey since 1998, è una economista americana, economista, pensatrice, sociologa, che ha scritto cose molto interessanti, fra cui recentemente un magnus opus di 3 volumi sulle virtù borghesi, il loro ruolo nella crescita, nella rivoluzione industriale, insomma, lo sviluppo economico e nella, diciamo così, creazione progressiva nei secoli dell'Europa e dell'Occidente che conosciamo e poi la sua diffusione nel mondo, e che ha pubblicato l'anno scorso un libro sulle virtues of liberalism, adesso non mi ricordo neanche più il titolo del libro di Didra, ma comunque in cui dice il futuro è liberale. Siccome io ho molti dubbi sul fatto che il futuro sia liberale, le ho detto, senti, perché non facciamo 2 chiacchiere sull'argomento? Dimmi, c'è qualcosa che non funziona?
Perché hai molti dubbi sul futuro che sia liberale?
Oddio, questo è spoiling what I'm writing, perché a me pare che il cosiddetto liberalismo sia del tutto inattuale, non riesce a capire qual è il problema del potere, non riesce a capire che esistono i conflitti di classe, dove classe non deve necessariamente essere proletari e capitalisti alla Marx, che Stato e economia non sono separabili, e che non è vero che siamo tutti uguali, non è vero che la democrazia compiuta, dove uno vale uno, è un oggetto che funziona secondo i crismi delle teorie liberal-democratiche. E non a caso il liberalismo è profondamente in crisi politica in tutti i paesi del mondo, perché ha lasciato un vuoto che nessuno è stato in grado di sostituire, che viene sostituito da quelli che noi chiamiamo populismi. Però secondo me sbagliamo a chiamarli populismi, perché il populismo è in sé qualcosa di dispregiativo. Sono tentativi di gestire la crisi, i fatti critici, i peccati capitali dell'Occidente, la globalizzazione, l'immigrazione, la minaccia russo-cinese, la crescita economica di pezzi del mondo che pensavamo fossero semplicemente, se non colonizzati, certo vassalli o comunque minori, no? Rispetto a noi. L'abnorme crescita dello Stato da cui vogliamo sempre di più, da cui vogliamo welfare, servizi, assicurazione, pensioni, però vorremmo che venissero dal cielo, e non mi pare che il liberalismo in nessun paese del mondo occidentale, perché poi possiamo trovare la risposta liberale in Russia, in Arabia Saudita, in Egitto o in Afghanistan, no? O in India, nei paesi del mondo dove è nato, cresciuto e affiorito, non mi pare che stia dando la risposta. Quindi questo è un po' il ragionamento detto senza voler annoiare in 3 minuti. E invece Didra pensa l'opposto, quindi sarà un dibattito.
Interessante. Quindi sostanzialmente attribuisce al liberalismo, anche se diametralmente opposti, gli stessi difetti del marxismo, cioè il presupporre che ci sia una, come dire, l'aver idealizzato la società e quindi non aver tenuto.
Sì, credo che i modelli ideali vanno costruiti quando si fa teoria, perché altrimenti non funziona, no?
Un'astrazione, chiaramente, sì.
Le astrazioni vanno fatte perché insomma, fare le astrazioni è, come dire, parte del lavoro, no? Però poi quando le stazioni cominciano a non funzionare bisogna... Il liberalismo non si pone, ecco, su questo, visto che siamo fra italiani, c'è una grande tradizione italiana di realismo politico che ha portato alcuni di questi a simpatizzare col fascismo, un fatto, però la teoria delle elite del potere, nelle sue sfaccettature, no? Che iniziarono a Mosca e Pareto, per esempio, una cosa su cui bisogna tornare. Gramsci alla fine era un paretiano, riconosceva il ruolo delle elite, l'egemonia, tutto questo nel mondo. Cioè, per fare un esempio banale, pensa appunto alla coppia Calenda-Renzi che vorrebbero fare i liberali italiani e chiediti, ma loro con che classe sociale stanno? Secondo me è impossibile dirlo perché fanno finta o pretendono di stare con tutti, perché fanno pretendere di fare tutto quello che propongono perché è giusto. Poi se ti fai la stessa domanda invece per Giorgia Meloni, dici, ma Giorgia Meloni con chi sta? Giorgia Meloni è molto esplicita, con te e me non sta. Sta con i tassisti, sta con i piccoli commercianti, sta con i dipendenti di ITA. Giorgia Meloni non ha nessun imbarazzo a dire io sto con questi sono gli italiani buoni che piacciono a me. Gli altri beh, insomma, che si adeguino.
Sì, la domanda è, se dovessimo seguire la teoria liberale, costoro dovrebbero, come dire, crescere, evolversi lavorativamente, diciamo, aumentare di produttività e quindi collocarsi nella fascia che tu intendi essere quella patrocinata da Renzi e Calenda. Quindi.
No, ma io non penso che ci sia una fascia patrocinata da Renzi e Calenda. Proprio perché come dire, Renzi e Calenda non mi dicono di patrocinare alcuna fascia, cioè non hanno mai alzato la manina dicendo guardate che noi siamo
Noi teniamo
a
per
favore
costoro.
Sì,
noi teniamo per costoro, diciamo, parteggiamo per costoro.
Pensa alla difficoltà che c'è a far dire anche solo a uno di questi, a Calenda in particolare, che le pensioni vanno ridotte. No?
Certo, ma la domanda è, nella realtà poi le pensioni vanno ridotte veramente per fare gli interessi delle pensioni stesse, per evitare guai maggiori, oppure le pensioni non vanno ridotte fino a quando lo Stato regge e poi vediamo, troviamo un'altra soluzione.
Dipende da che interessi vuoi fare. Se tu vuoi servire gli interessi dei pensionati attuali non vanno ridotti, poi troveremo una soluzione. Se invece vuoi servire gli interessi di chi ha meno di 40 anni e contribuisce, non c'è dubbio alcuno, a mio avviso, che le pensioni andrebbero ridotte, quella riduzione verrebbe trasferita in una riduzione dei contributi sociali. A mio avviso non c'è dubbio alcuno. Cioè l'aritmetica, l'economia, cioè proprio non serve essere grande, è così.
Certo, sì.
Quindi
Certo.
lì c'è un conflitto di classe, cioè la classe è... In Italia, a mio avviso, è il conflitto più grosso. L'altro conflitto grosso è fra gli interessi proprio del gruppo sociale che Giorgia rappresenta, quella che lei chiama gli autonomi, no? I piccoli imprenditori italiani, e letteralmente il resto del paese, in particolare i lavoratori dipendenti dell'industria, i quali pagano beni e servizi a prezzi molto maggiori. È ridicolo che in un paese come gli Stati Uniti, che ha un costo della vita in media, ovviamente con redditi molto più alti che in Italia, anche prima che l'euro si svalutasse, io pagavo, anzi no, adesso si sta rovesciando. Ho detto una cazzata, come Boldrin delle volte inverte. Adesso può essere che fra un po', se si svaluta ulteriormente l'euro, mi convenga fare gli acquisti in Europa, ma fino a un anno fa la mia spesa standard, le scarpe che ho ai piedi di La Sportiva, non si vedono, costavano meno qui nel negozio, nel distributore REI, che è uno che vende cosa sportiva, che non in un negozio di Treviso o di Venezia, che è a 2 passi da dove La Sportiva c'è la fabbrica. E questo perché? Perché c'è un settore di servizi alla distribuzione totalmente inefficiente, e quindi è plateale che quel settore lì non fa i miei interessi per quanto mi riguarda. Io voglio Amazon e REI, questi qua possono tranquillamente tutti chiudere e andare a trovarsi un altro lavoro. sono protetti da sussidi, da tassazione privilegiata, da blocchi alla concorrenza e così via, no?
Penso che il problema
Non
si
è
porrà
Brillo,
ancora di
non so se state scherzando o cercando di offendere, ma insomma, questa roba che io sarei Brillo dalle elezioni. È successo quello previsto, né mi rallegro né mi rattristo per il risultato elettorale. Prego.
Questo problema si porrà ulteriormente allora quando l'intelligenza artificiale prenderà una grossa fetta, perché se pensi che già adesso stai pagando di più alcuni servizi per un conflitto che c'è tra chi fornisce quei servizi, per esempio in Italia e in altri paesi dove ad esempio c'è una maggiore efficienza, tu pensa quando ci sarà conflitto tra l'efficienza portata da sistemi autonomi e, ricordo per esempio la Svezia che propone di tassare i robot e gli engine di intelligenza artificiale. Lì il
Cioè, quello
conflitto si
possiamo
porterà.
discuterlo se è il caso di tassare i robot e l'intelligenza artificiale, però il punto è che se li introduciamo e li usiamo, di sicuro il meccanismo diventa più efficiente. Dopodiché la questione di se tassarli o meno, ovviamente è una questione di dove porre il carico fiscale, visto che si vuole finanziare una serie di spese pubbliche, no? Capisci cosa voglio dire?
Il conflitto è tra quelli che
si vuole mantenere un minimo di spesa
certo.
pubblica. Quindi,
Beh, tassi la ricchezza prodotta, il conflitto a quel punto è tra chi detiene le fabbriche o comunque le corporation che hanno ovviamente in carico questi oggetti e chi prima forniva servizi manuali, tra virgolette, non automatizzati. Sempre conflitto si tratta. Si tratta di conflitti tra sistemi a minore efficienza e maggiore efficienza.
In Italia c'è questa enorme resistenza al cambio tecnologico, no? Sappiamo che c'è questa enorme resistenza al cambio tecnologico perché ha un effetto sostituzione su... Scusate, c'è qualcosa che non mi funziona, non mi si apre? Sto cercando di aprire il libro di Deirdre per mostrarlo e per qualche ragione... Perché non si apre? Non si apre. È un Adobe, ma non mi si apre.
PDF. A volte il PDF, i link del PDF confliggono tra di loro differenti viewer e alla fine non te li apre. Una cosa che già è capitato. Se usi Adobe Acrobat ogni tanto fa dei danni. No, non abbiamo parlato di carbon tax. Vedevo un commento.
Abbiamo parlato di carbon tax decisamente.
Però il problema dell'automazione si porrà. Idealmente è un paese che ha una demografia in diminuzione dovrebbe in realtà incentivare.
Per esempio sì, però
A livello di logica.
se incentivi l'automazione in Italia, ora fai i danni siccome l'automazione sta avvenendo tantissimo nel settore dei servizi, no? Infatti non è un caso che tutti dicono ma questa cosa è bruffissima, no? Tutti si concentrano sull'Italia manifatturiera, abbiamo il manifatturiero, senza rendersi conto che il manifatturiero fa, non mi ricordo più cosa fa, il 17% del PIL italiano, roba del genere, 19%,
sì.
insomma,
non
e che il
ricordo
PIL
anche io le
italiano
cifre, comunque.
è al 78%, 73% servizi. E che se la produttività italiana non cresce, il povero manifatturiero può fare tutti i miracoli di questo mondo, ma quando sei un quinto dell'economia e meno, cioè, non è che puoi supplire per il fatto che gli altri 4/5 sono stagnanti e non crescono e anzi calano, no? Il problema è siccome poi quei 4/5 sono anche i tuoi input, tu non solo conti poco nell'aggregato, ma siccome devi cercare di compensare per il fatto che i tuoi input, che so, i trasporti, la posta, tutta quella roba lì,
Prendi una piccola
funziona
cittadina.
peggio, poi ti rompi il cazzo e vai in Polonia.
Prendi una piccola cittadina anche del nord-est, eccetera, eccetera, un capoluogo di provincia. Guardiamo quanti lavorano nel manufatturiero nella popolazione, prendiamo la popolazione, facciamo uno split tra quelli che lavorano nel manufatturiero e quelli che lavorano nei servizi. Gran parte ci sarà un po' di agricoltura, ma l'agricoltura in Italia è al 4%, non ricordo, comunque deve essere veramente ridotta, se non ricordo male. Sì, dal 2 al 4, se mi ricordo. io non ho presente queste statistiche, mi occupo di altro, per cui sicuramente dico corbellerie. Però, diciamo, se uno prende una cittadina e guarda il lavoro che fanno gli abitanti di questa cittadina, si rende conto ed è un modello, diciamo, applicabile. Non dico di- di prendere dei casi eclatanti, diciamo, cittadine particolarmente votate al manufatturiero, ma una media, diciamo. Su guardi in giro, sono servizi, dipendenti pubblici,
Certo.
chi si occupa dell'anagrafe, chi lavora negozi, un po' di distribuzione, anche le aziende, se non c'è proprio un tessuto produttivo particolarmente intenso, sono ridotti. Il problema è che chi lavora nei servizi purtroppo quasi sempre o molto spesso sono servizi pubblici. Ricordo in Italia quanto è la percentuale di economia intermediata dallo Stato, direttamente e indirettamente? 70-80%, se non vado errato, no? Deve essere sul
Sì, poi c'è
70.
l'elemento servizi pubblici addirittura, se aggiungi quelli pubblici lì siamo peggio ancora. E però capisci che anche questo, per esempio, è tutto un conflitto di nuovo di classi, di gruppi di interesse, no? No?
Però il problema è che la percentuale, diciamo, produttiva su cui insistono i costi di questi servizi, che sono chiaramente in perdita, diventa sempre più piccola. La domanda è fino a quando regge. Allora, il sistema deve equilibrarsi in qualche modo oppure semplicemente sposta nel tempo e cresce a debito fino a quando
Ma
regge la
sai,
coppa.
il sistema vero è il sistema cambia. Il sistema cambia, Marco, se ci pensi. No? Quello che sta succedendo è che la struttura dell'economia italiana continua a cambiare, per qualche ragione gli italiani sembrano non accorgersene, ma continua a cambiare con l'uscita lenta di un certo tipo di cose, no? di aziende e di persone. Cioè la fuga dei cervelli cosiddetta, che poi non è fuga dei cervelli, ma è fuga di chi sa fare le cose. Cos'è se non un cambiamento nella composizione della forza lavoro italiana?
Certo.
L'arrivo, tutti si apprende perché arrivano dall'Africa quelli con i barconi. Cioè, non è che arrivano dall'Africa con i barconi per caso, arrivano dall'Africa quelli con i barconi perché c'è domanda e nel contempo c'è l'uscita dei giovani e anche non più giovani che vanno altrove. Cioè, questo è il punto. A certo tipo di aziende in Italia o se ne vanno o muoiono e vengono sostituite da cosa? Da bar e attività per il... Cioè, questo è l'adattamento, quindi non è che crolla il sistema, si modifica. La maniera in cui vedi che si modifica è perché di fatto, scusate, c'è veramente un mistero. Mi vede tutti i file PDF che ho, ma non mi vede quello di Deirdre. Cioè, fa ridere sta roba. Vabbè. Quindi cioè, i sistemi economici così complessi non è che crollano, più crolla se crolla il debito pubblico. Se
Beh,
va in default il
alla
debito pubblico.
lunga diventa...
Il sistema si modifica. La modificazione com'è che le vedi? Le vedi guardando gli aggregati statistici e notando che il reddito per capita medio degli italiani non cresce. E poi guardando il disaggregato e notando che cresce un pochino quello della quartile o dei 2 decili superiori, mentre ovviamente per compensazione calano gli altri e che quindi la grande maggioranza degli italiani sta peggio. Però non sono necessariamente quelli di 30 anni fa, perché alcuni se ne sono andati. Cioè, Boldrin non sta
Certo.
peggio di come stava 40 anni fa quando se n'è andato, lì sta meglio. E tanti altri come Boldrin, anche Bussi sta meglio, perché fa parte del decile top.
Noi ce ne siamo andati.
Esatto.
Noi ci siamo spostati in UK nel 2008, diciamo, e adesso siamo diventati americani per quello. Sì, comunque è chiaro.
Queste robe, sai, sembrano, non lo so come dire, sembrano difficili, no? Ma non è che siano proprio così difficili. Io le trovo abbastanza semplici, però chiaramente non vengono notate e bisogna, è un po' quello che facciamo, no? Cercare di spiegarle. La gente sembra non capire in che senso e come avviene il declino italiano. Abbastanza impressionante sta roba, no? Che non si capisca, non ti pare? Cioè... Perché non capiscono? Perché è vero che nessuno glielo racconta, no?
La ragione per cui c'è la paura non lo so, della privatizzazione, non so, vedo qui a Roma la qualità dei servizi fornita dalle varie ATAC, AMA, eccetera, eccetera, e la gente dice ti porteranno il biglietto dell'autobus a 3 euro e gli dici guarda che lo paghi già, se tu guardi il debito della tua città lo paga qualcun altro, ma lo paga sempre 10 miliardi di debito, dividi, fai la divisione e vedi quanto ti costa il biglietto, però quello è occulto e quindi da questo punto di vista c'è un camouflage molto efficace, diciamo, dalla politica, quindi ovviamente questa cosa
E
esce dal
anche questa
dibattito,
roba,
però.
no, che gli italiani sembrano non capire la nozione che trasferire i costi da un punto a un altro non è che elimina i costi, semplicemente nasconde quei costi in un altro posto, però poi insomma i costi sono costi, non è che...
No, mi ha colpito molto il vostro, diciamo, quando osservavo da fuori il fenomeno delivery oltre il fatto di focalizzarsi sulla scuola, che è oggettivamente importante. Ho seguito il vostro dibattito l'altra sera sulla scuola, molto molto interessante, molto, anche perché sono purtroppo informazioni è addirittura un problema trovare le informazioni in giro oggi. Uno dei problemi più grossi, penso, e lo senti proprio dalle persone che ti contattano anche sui vari YouTube, sui social. C'è fame di informazione reliable, competente da parte di una
Cioè,
porzione, diciamo, di popolazione. Poi man mano che per
tu che sei un
contaminazione alta.
imprenditore, perché non convinci qualcuno a investire un po' di dinderi su... Oh, eccola qua! Un po' di dinderi su Liberi Oltre, che potrebbe crescere in una cosa un po' più... Eccola qua. Hello!
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Well, I'm good, but I'm trying to get onto your
Still
system.
loading.
You're fine.
I don't know how to do it.
You don't have to
Apparently
do
not.
anything.
I don't know
This
what
is
you're
my
talking
friend
about.
Marco. We're here chatting, introducing the interview with you. Marco is an
That's fine,
interpreter.
but I can see
Deirdre, you're
myself.
fine. People can see you and they can hear you. Both
Okay,
things are fine.
but I can't see you.
What do you mean you can't see me?
Well, I
Oh.
can't see you. I only see myself. That's okay. I kind of
Well, it's
enjoy
okay.
looking at myself.
The only thing you might want to do is to move the camera slightly so you're more in the center. Perfect. That's fine.
Yeah.
So when I put up this view, your face is completely in the thing. And
Yeah.
here instead we have a view of your corner. That's quite fine. What is it you don't? What is it you don't see? Because if you see,
I don't see you. In
strange.
Zoom, I see the other people.
Yeah, no, but here too, it's strange that you don't, in fact, because given that you appeared in what's called the studio, you're supposed to see me the same way I
You're
see
in
you.
the show. Everyone can see and hear you. That's
All right, well, that's fine. They're showing you, and then I'll send you the video so you can see what's
Okay.
It's being recorded. So, how's life? You're in Chicago?
Yeah, I am. I just got back from Portugal.
Right. I heard you were in Portugal.
Yeah, just for a few days.
And then off to?
Next week or on Sunday, I go to Oslo. And then the following week, I come back for a couple of days and I go to Queen's University in Belfast to get an honorary degree. And then I go to Cato for a month. So I've been traveling a great deal.
Oh, Cato. I never come to Cato. I have to get invited.
It's not conservative. It's liberal in the Italian sense.
But Cato is a bit of a mixed bag, huh?
What the word?
No, the institute, the production, the output of things at Cato.
I don't know what you mean by mixed bag. It's
in the sense that it's very libertarian things sometimes. On other, they're strangely ideological. For example, their whole view of international relation, I find it hard to follow.
That I don't know much about, but on the economic side, they're fairly straightforward. They're just liberals.
Yeah, on the economic sense, I agree. I also have written for them. I have a few publications on Cato Journal well, so I was trying to open up my PDF version of your book to show the cover to the people listening to us.
But I don't know what book you're talking about, dear. I've written.
Well, why liberalism works. Why liberalism works, which was the original idea. I wanted to hear from you.
Good.
Why liberalism works, and I wanted to do a bit of advertising, but for whatever reason, it's refusing to obey me. And so while I try again to open it up, why don't you introduce the main concept of the book to our listener? And then I'll maybe, if I succeed opening it up, I put up, I also show them. In the meanwhile, I just show a little rendition. Go ahead.
Okay, you tell me when to start.
You can start anytime. This is the book, ladies and gentlemen. This is the cover of the book. And in Italian, it's not translated yet, but I think
it's on the
Roberto Mingardi is raising funds to translate it through Istituto Bruno Leoni, right? Am I correct?
When we've had great success with that, so it'll come out soon.
All right. Let's hear from Deirdre. What's the book about?
Well, in some ways, it's an answer to the widespread claim on both sides of the political spectrum, the conventional political spectrum from left to right, that liberalism, in the sense of free markets and free minds, doesn't work, hasn't worked, and that we need more statism. We need more centralization. We need more rule from above. I think the current election results in Italy are a fine example of this. I've never understood why Italians keep voting for politicians who want to give governo ladro more power. But that's what they've done again. They do it over and over and over again, even though most Italians are essentially liberal or even...
Wait. Let me interrupt you there. What makes you believe the most Italian are essentially liberal? My friend Marco and I are actually convinced the most Italian are being educated at the opposite, of the very fascist or stalinist culture, with two ideological painting, one black and one red, but they're not so different.
I suppose, that's true, but I think in their natural impulses, they're anarchisti.
Anarchisti. Well, that's one reason why anarchism and liberalism are very far away from each other.
Well,
it's essentially a free rider.
Yeah, well, one can take that view. I actually view anarchists with as I'm friendly towards anarchists, even though I'm not one. But sure, in the way they're taught in school and university, they're taught to admire the state and to increase the size of the state. And but I think their personalities, so far as I understand the Italian personality, is more free will. So, but then there are people in the United States and elsewhere on the right, say on the Catholic right, who are against liberalism, which they regard as causing a rot in the society, and I don't think either of them are correct. I don't think the left, as you say, both the left and the right are statist. And that's the opposite of liberalism. You know, Sure.
Can I put some remarks on what you're saying? I mean, the Italians are living this contradiction in which they're extremely anarchist in their own, because Italy is the country where everyone has a private shop rather than.
Right.
I mean, we've got 6 million of VAT IDs rather than having large corporations and so on. And this is not due only to legislation and regulation of man labor, even though this has quite a heavy impact. I think it's part of the culture of the mindset. At the same time, since they see this sort of anarchy, they're seeking for order, and they demand the state to set rules and to provide them with the orders they can't see because of this anarchy. So actually, it's this contradiction which is peculiar of Italy. This is my personal opinion, of course. I'm not. I'm not fit to describe this, but this is what I perceive personally.
Well, but I agree. There is a contradiction here. After all, Italy invented fascism. On the one hand, at the same time, there were numerous anarchists worldwide. I mean, actual anarchists who came from Italy.
Anarchy is something which I remember was already pretty much diffused during the 18th century.
Sure, it was, but it became a mass movement, an important mass movement in Spain, and not so much a mass movement, but a significant movement in Italy, especially in the 1920s and 30s. So matters of political placing aside, what liberalism is the political theory that no one should be a slave. No one should be under the physical control of anyone else. Now, of course, there are exceptions to this. If Italy is invaded by Albania or something, then there's a case for the state compelling young men to serve. In fact, we're seeing this in Ukraine. Or if there's an invasion of COVID-19, there's a clear role for the state. But we liberals, unlike all the other political philosophies, except indeed anarchism, believe that subordination of wife to husband or slave to master, or indeed citizen to the state is bad for people, and it works in a vulgar economic way spectacularly well. I claim that what Simon Kuznets called modern economic growth is not a result of investment, as necessary as it is. It's certainly not a result of slavery, actual chattel slavery, or of empire. That's not what caused it. It was caused by allowing people, as the English say, to have a go. It's a very sporting metaphor, which is appropriate for English people. And they had a go. For the first time in human history, more and more people were allowed to try out things. And what you got from that was an explosion of innovation. It's there.
Yeah, let me step into that. Take you back to one thing you mentioned, because I think we agree on that. And I find your 3 volumes I was mentioning before to the people listening to us, recommending to take a look, if maybe not able to read the all 3 volumes, which are also not small, but
well, but I have, by the way, I should intervene. I have a popular version with Art Carden called "Leave Me Alone and I'll Make You Rich."
All right, then maybe guys, you should read that.
It's a popular
synthesis of the scholarly work. But let me so I tend to agree that the cultural change, what you call the bourgeois culture and virtues and values brought about, it started out in Italy, in the merchants of Venice and Florence and Pisa and so on and so forth, way back almost 1,000 years ago, in fact, played a very crucial role, and a series of other circumstances as a general driving force for the last 1,000 years. So fine, but I think that the limit of liberalism today in the current environment is stopping there and then remaining vague. And as an example, let me just give us an example. One thing you mentioned before, COVID. You said, well, a situation of epidemics, dangerous epidemics going around, justifies some form of state intervention. Now, typically, the argument a liberal uses, and I use myself, I'm not saying that I have some secret theory here to expose. I'm just exposing something that I think is a problem, an issue, a criticality, is some argument of externality, right? In those circumstances that we can rephrase in a Kantian way. If I am sick of an infectious disease and the disease is serious above a certain threshold, then it's legitimate to say that my freedom is impairing the freedom of others and the health of others and the life of others. And therefore, it becomes a matter of, I don't know which word to use here, right? And that's the first problem, is that because it's just, it's efficient, it's fair to pass some collective decision to say, Michele, your freedom of movement is being limited. Otherwise, you're going to infect Marco and Deirdre, and that's violating their freedom. Good. If you look at what government did, and let me tell you, in Italy, the lockdown and some of the measures taken during that year, 2 years, to supposedly counteract COVID have been a huge driving force behind the recent electoral victory of Fratelli d'Italia. It's made apparent in people's declaration, the way they grew, and so on and so forth. And the reason was, well, sure, you can limit my freedom, but how do we decide the extent of it? It's clear to me, for example, that following liberal democratic procedure, the government of Italy, and I complain, restricted people's freedom way too much.
Yes, I agree.
You see, and that's where the liberalism thing leaves me. Not that I have something to substitute, Deirdre, but it leaves me sitting down in the middle of a river and I don't know where to go. Because what is that I should have used as argument, say, hey, look, the curfew is insane, damn you. If I want to walk the dog to take a piss a mile from home, that's not going to infect anybody. Let me just take the walk. You see what I mean?
Yes, sure. I understand what you mean. And I certainly agree that there was gigantic overreach. But the problem is that if you don't adopt liberalism, there's no limit at all to state action. The problem is our economic idea of externalities, which was introduced about 100 years ago, especially by A.C. Pigou in Cambridge, and then was adopted by Paul Samuelson and Joe Stiglitz in more or less a direct line. And the problem is that externalities are socially defined. if I wear a hideous dress, or indeed to speak of the riots now in Iran, if I refuse to wear a scarf on my head in Iran, the state takes an interest. And the reason it takes an interest, the theological justification, is that if a woman unveils herself, she's a great temptation to men. That's exactly how it's understood.
Exactly.
In both Orthodox Judaism and in conservative Islam. And so we have to be liberals if we want a free society. We have to start from the presumption of liberty. Incidentally, it's not the rise of the bourgeoisie that caused the modern world. There's always been a middle class. In the ancient Mesopotamia, 4,000 years ago, there was a bourgeoisie, a middle class.
Yeah, but there were three of them.
I gradually came to understand that although the first volume of the three in my trilogy is mainly about the virtues of the bourgeoisie, among which are a tendency to liberalism. Then I gradually came to understand, I'm a slow thinker. I finally started to get it clear that it was this new idea that anyone in business or in their personal life should be free and not a slave to another human. That's the secret sauce.
But what do you mean for being free? Because when there is a debt, for instance, you are committed to do something. What is a debt in this case? It's an obligation to do something. So there are different shades of gray in this sense.
Well, I think that being under the physical control of other people is
physical.
Physical, not persuasion, not insults, not speeches, but physical coercion. And if we had an ideology of non-physical coercion, a lot of the things that we don't like about statism, which is the opposite, would go away. People would stop expecting the state to do them favors and would stop expecting the state to help them hate other people.
If we go...
Go ahead.
Go. If we think of the example that Michele did some minutes ago, when it was thinking about the coercion of being forced to stay at home during the pandemics.
Yeah.
If you look at what's happening in China, for instance, they are forced to stay at home. There would be no opportunity to go back. So if someone is demanding this not in the right way, it can even cripple the economy and can do some sort of damage to the society.
Yeah. Sure.
So the reaction that occurred in Italy was the result of the election, according to Michele. But in my opinion, this is just a sort of a transient of a situation which stabilizes. I think that in democracies, when a government makes mistakes to some degree of different adaptation, the transit has different time to come to a steady status.
That's
say it again.
That's the hope. But it can
possibly.
It can easily go.
It's like demand and offer. It's like more or less the demand and offer. You need a time for the transient to stabilize to the new price, and by the time it changes again, there will be another transient to the new level. So actually, it's a combination of this transient. I'm looking at it taking it from a mathematical approach. Maybe I'm not fit for providing this.
I don't think. I think what's happening there is that you're comparing a massive political change of votes, say, in which what's being purchased is a bundle of goods with individual markets in which one good is for sale. If it doesn't do well, people move their expenditure to some other good.
Exactly.
Immediately. But that's
vote is a purchase.
But it is a purchase, and you're comparing the two, and the problem is, as we've seen in many elections, because it's bundled, you can't tell exactly what it is you're buying in voting. And indeed,
you will never, even in products, you don't understand.
Let me step in there. Let me step in. Say two things. One, you're pointing to one issue, which is, I'm afraid, liberal theory is somewhat limited on that. I mean, at least in my understanding of liberal political theory. That is, when you vote, at the end, you delegate discretion.
Yeah.
You transfer the power to somebody to use discretion in managing your life.
Yeah.
Which is why, admittedly, I mean, it's a key point of liberalism in variety of version that this should be done with care, and that's why we have constitutions that limit the power that get delegated. We have an idea of conflicting or at least completing powers, the division of power, tripartite or more. We have idea about federalism and so on, because we understand that whenever we vote, elect someone, there is an amount of discretion. There is no rules. I mean, our friends Lucas and Prescott and others dream about rules rather than discretion. We know that it's good in models, but in the political reality, it's just not there. And it's not always there in the economic reality, where you can never write a complete contract. You always write incomplete contracts. So that's one first problem, though, that the handling of discretion seem to be growing in liberal democratic government. How can I say? A lot more elastic than it used to be. The risk of Trump on one hand or Conte on the other, the locking down and so on. So that's one issue that I would like to hear from Deirdre. The other, let me finish. I'll give you two questions, then if you want, we go back to that. The other is, and this is also a bit, I think, the interesting but also the challenging part of your research on growth, is that you're making, at the end, you're saying, it works if everybody shared the culture and the norms.
Yeah.
But what if people don't share the culture and the norms of
look. The great advantage of liberalism is you don't need to share the culture and the norms. That's really classical liberalism. It's John Stuart.
Yeah, but it fails, Deirdre.
No, it didn't fail. It succeeded spectacularly. It caused income to go up by a factor of 30. So there's no failure from the economic point of view. Now, the growth.
If somebody was a bit more a Marxist than me, they would say, yeah, but then it produces a lot of revolution and struggles and so on. And that's why income went up for everybody. Otherwise, it would have been gone up only for the bad guys.
No, you're an economist. You know that that's not so.
Look, I have to be the one contradicting. Otherwise, it's not fun.
Okay.
All right.
But it's not so that it failed. People say it fails. And the only way we as scholars can contradict it is to preach, is to show historically that it worked as it did, But there's a terribly important quantitative point here. The kind of government that I favor is one that takes, say, 10% of national income for expenditure on goods and services and modest amounts of transfers, mainly to poor people. 10%. That's what Italy had. That's what the United States had, Germany had before the First World War. And the trouble is that the modern French state, and the others are close behind, takes 57% of national output for its purposes. It's either buying airplanes or the salaries of professors, or it's transferring large amounts of cash to owners of vineyards. So the scale matters. A liberal society in which people consider themselves to be adults. I also want to call liberalism adultism. There's no mama or papa state. You take care of yourself. Now, my version of this is Christian liberalism. I'm almost finished with a book making an appeal to my fellow Christians on this point. But you also take an interest in the welfare of the poor. But you don't treat them like spoiled children or like bad children, the sort of socialist or conservative view. Either they're sad children or they're bad children. No. You treat people as adults. And that, I think, has great appeal. But as you know, as an economist, the ordinary voters are very confused about this because they see themselves getting services from the state. Roads, for example, which could easily be paid for privately. And they say, well, we've got to have roads, so we've got to have a large state. So there's an awful lot of historical confusion about this, and a misunderstanding of how deeply God's gift of Christian liberty can affect the society if you leave it alone.
Well, that's one reading. There is a huge literature that claims that, in fact, the real birth of modern individualism and liberalism is St. Paul, or Paul, better, annunciation that everybody has a soul, not just the Jew, the Gentiles. Huh?
No, I go into this in some detail in this book.
Well, we can debate that. I mean, it's not obvious that you're right.
Debate, but I'm correct and they're wrong. Individualism has always existed. And the idea that...
No, Deirdre, you're not understanding. It's quite clear that in pre-Christian culture, especially the Greek ones, individualism as a human sentiment or feeling was there, but there is also a profound conviction the humans are not identical. Not all of them have a soul. The kings are born kings and are born to rule, and the philosophers are born to be philosophers. Well, that's a major, to the extent that this was a worldview that was accepted by everybody.
No.
It makes a big difference, the notion of equality that the Christian introduced. This is all correct.
No, you're wrong.
Hold it.
I do not agree with you, Darren.
Well, that's fine. You correct me later. But still, let me also, apart from correcting me, push you into the question I asked. This is still a cultural definition. That is, and the problem is, how self-enforcing is it?
Well, it's not self-enforcing.
That's the problem. How self-enforcing is it when somebody deviate?
Now, look, if somebody deviates in a market, and I decide I like Pete's coffee, and you decide you like Maxwell House coffee, there's no problem. You buy Pete's coffee, I buy Pete's coffee, you buy Maxwell House. That's the problem is when we have to make decisions collectively. And the point is, we don't need to make many decisions collectively. That's the basic liberal idea, because to make decisions collectively, in the way that Rousseau spoke of the general will, is to coerce people, is to make people identical in their political and economic, no, not their economic rights, but in their, make them all slaves of the general will. And that's not, one of the problems that liberalism has, and here I concede your point to some degree, is that it hasn't, in its very spirit and definition, it doesn't want to coerce people to anything. So it wants, so to speak, to run politics in the society and so forth on the model of a marketplace.
Exactly.
The old notion of the marketplace of ideas. And without coercion, the marketplace then throws up fascism, communism, and other versions of statism. People, because they're badly informed or don't think it through, or they don't value their votes very much, say, oh, well, let's try fascism again, as though Italy didn't have enough problems with fascism.
Well, you know, as the socialist says, oh, this is not the right way to do it, we'll do it again better the next time.
That's right. They always say
Italians with fascism.
They always say they always say that, and
all ideology says that, Deirdre. It's
but
in the nature of ideology, right?
But my ideology worked, dear. No, come on, no.
That's why I love this woman.
Don't be a cynical Italian here.
No, I'm not a cynical Italian. I'm the guy debating with you.
Be an earnest American about this. And the point is that liberalism worked dramatically well. It was not because of state action that we became so rich. And as you know, we became unprecedentedly rich, 3,000% over our level in 1800, as late as 1800. 3,000% increase. No amount of most state action had little or nothing to do with that. What it was caused by, this is why, as part of my argument, I have to show that investment or exploitation, which are the two possibilities of the right and the left for explaining economic growth, don't make any sense. In investment,
there are consequences, but at that part, you see, let me stop you there for a moment, because there is a part in which we agree. Even if we sit down and look at historical details, we may disagree on details, but basically we agree that economic growth and the miracles of growth and blah, blah, blah has to do with the progressive freeing up of human initiative.
That's right.
As you said, you know.
That's right.
Let people have a go. All right, fine. I agree. And even if when we look at the details of that, it's funny and complicated, right? Why? So one question is, why is it that it went in stages and there was a kind of torch passing from, say, the Italian communes and Venice and so on, the richest city by 1500, to the northern Hanseatic and the Amsterdam and so on, and the Dutch. So what is it that in Venice, Pisa, and whatnot failed?
No. For one thing, very few of these places actually failed. Their income didn't go down.
But it stopped going up.
So what? That it stopped going up. It was look. Economic growth is not a horse race. There's a great statist sort of league table Lega talk about growth tables and so forth. And that really obscures the biggest point about history in the last 1,000 years, which is that after 1800, virtually everyone started to grow. Some people were slow to take it up, like China. Some people were very fast, like the English. In between were the Italians. But everyone grew by this immense amount. And to say, oh, well, the Germans grew a little faster than the Italians. How sad. Oh, my. That's crazy.
Signora, in part, I mean, you may decide that it's a second order issue, but it's a relevant issue, both scientific and political. So if I look, for example, given that Marco and I are Italian, and many of the people listening to us are Italian, and Italy very well, it's a relevant issue, also from an historical perspective, saying, well, Italy average income has been stagnant for about 30 years now.
I think those numbers, which you hear about lots of countries, are false, and the reason they are.
No, they're not. In the case of Italy, I'm pretty sure they're not. I've been looking at those numbers for a while.
You've been looking at the number for a while, but have you allowed for changes in the quality of goods? And if you speak to the American agency in charge of making up the consumer price index, and you find that they agree, alas, that they can't adequately include.
Sure, I'm quite aware of that, but I'm quite aware of the problem that we have the chain index and adjusting for quality and so on and so forth. But let me finish what I was saying, and I'll get to that. Because there is a distributional issue underlying that. When you have a country that on average stays constant, then you look at decile distribution, you'll find that a good fraction of the population with current computation of real prices has actually an income that is 10, 20, 25, even 30% below what it had in 1992. And as far as the quality is concerned, true, but not necessarily, because while it's true the marketable good are adjusted for quality, that's not the total. So when I look at public services, for example, those nominally have gone up because I compute them at cost, and public servants are being paid more. But anybody knows that the quality of education they're getting in public school or university in Italy is a lot worse than what they used to.
Yeah, but how about
the environmental? So I would be very careful there.
I am very careful.
Can I introduce one idea? Maybe I'm not fit to tell this, but possibly
sure you are.
we were comparing Renaissance with the growth of UK during the 17th, 18th century. One of the factors I think might have impacted is cooperation and organization. Because if you are too much individualist or this sort of anarchy of let go, let people go, at some stage you need organization, because you must scale up and have an organized society in which you have, for instance, companies.
Here's the
Don't you
problem.
think this is
No, I don't think so. And here's why. I mean, I've thought about a lot of these issues. It's not, you aren't, so far you've not surprised me with any issue that either of you have brought up. And I'm not surprised, because people haven't thought through these things. The market is a massive form of cooperation. Now, here's the analogy I'd like you to think about. The Italian language is not centrally planned. There were attempts under the ashes to change the spelling of to get ristorantes, but massively, or it is true that in Italy, the imposition of the dialect of Siena was an action of the government. But mostly the Italian language evolves. So do your personal friendships. So does Wikipedia. So does music and art and science for the most part. They evolve. And they evolve in a liberal way. There's no statism in them. And I think you'll agree with me that the Italian language is a massive instrument of cooperation. If you spoke Sardinian or Veneziano or something, you wouldn't be able to cooperate with each other. And it's true of all these things. They're all spontaneous orders. And the market is a massive and important spontaneous order. And it's that was freed by liberalism. And it is a form of cooperation. Now, it's true that if people are suspicious of each other, if they hate each other in particular, then they can't cooperate very well. The Venetians and the Dutch were very good at commerce because they tolerated people who were not like them. And of course, if you hate too many people, you can't do a lot of things. But I think that I don't think the answer. Well, and then of course, I don't think the answer to problems of cooperation is more state action. Because the problem is that,
I'm sorry, why do you want to use this simple dichotomy that it's purely individual, self-organized? First of all, frankly, I've thought about this stuff too as well. And the idea of self-organization is a myth.
yeah,
Because either it becomes a tautology, given that anything that is happening to human society is done by humans, and there is no predisposed God that takes care of introducing this or the other law or institution, then everything is self-organized, including Nazism or Stalinism. They're all, in some sense, outcomes of social interaction that eventually lead to Pol Pot. But then it's a tautology. Well, otherwise, if I have to read it in the form of Hayek Catalatica, I'm sorry, it doesn't work. And I think that Marco's example had to do with the whole cause problem, right? Wise cause correctly says, well, why don't we have firms organized as markets in a spontaneous way by calling prices? And we know the answer the cause gives, and we know that for those that are listening to us, this is COASE, cause. An economist at Chicago now passed away that got the Swedish prize a while ago, and whose contribution was mostly thinking about theory organization and firms, and why we have firms as opposed to markets. But that's exactly the same problem that the Marco is putting. At a certain point, you either spontaneously or for an act of will of a guy, delegate power. That's not only in the state, it's also in the firm.
Well, of course, I agree.
Right?
I was a colleague of Coase.
Oh, no, I know you were. Right? We have a public. I have to explain the public.
I understand Coase very well. And I think you slightly misrepresent Coase, but that's okay. But of course it's true that orders from a boss are essential for anything other than a one-person firm, right? We all agree that there has to be a master, and the master gives orders. But and as Ronald said, whether it's a good idea to do it yourself or to outsource it is itself an economic question and serves to define the limits of a firm. So I understand that. But there is a third thing. There's individual action. And there's, let's take an extreme case, extreme central planning on the pattern of, I don't know, North Korea. So there's individual action and there's North Korea. In between, there are many, many what would you call them?
Degrees.
Moving equilibrium. Moving
equilibrium. Fine, I agree.
Equilibria, like language.
There are some dynamic
like language or like innovation, like the 30,000 new products introduced into U.S. grocery stores every year. 30,000. Maybe 300 make it into some grocery store as permanent. 30,000. So there's this constant trying out. And so it's not orders from any kind of boss that does that. It's not from God. I'm not saying that. Although I say in my book that God has got something to do with it, but let's set that aside. It's coming from the interaction of people. And that's what Hayek and others, and for God's sakes, Adam Smith meant by spontaneous order. So it's a big mistake, I think, to believe that the only options are sort of individualism, this very foolish word, in my opinion, on the one hand, and then you get extremes of individualism, like what's her name, the novelist Ayn Rand, which are foolish in their own way. And you
glad to hear that, because there is a lot of association between the pseudo philosophy of Ayn Rand, and liberalism, or even libertarianism.
She really didn't understand spontaneous order. She understood.
Maybe we should leave it for but I tend to agree.
She understood heroes, male. They were always male. She understood heroic action. She was a romantic. And that's not how the economy works. I mean, obviously, there are heroes every day, small heroes, people making innovations. And it's the interaction among them that led to our great enrichment. So liberalism did work. And then it was overcome by this, you could call it intellectual habit of supposing that if there is a watch in the field, there must be a watchmaker, that everything must be caused by someone.
So what do you have in mind here when you say it was overcome by this idea that everything must be made by someone?
Well, look, liberalism had its brief day as the partially dominant ideology as you know, in Britain in the early 19th century.
Yeah.
And
because the problem is how actually it is now as a tool, not only of policy but also of understanding what's happening.
Yeah.
I want to understand your thought about.
Well, but what happened is that there was a reaction to it. Italy in 1861 was liberal.
We can have a serious debate about Italy.
The United States was in 1861 was liberal, except
the United States. I agree.
Slavery.
But putting you see the U.S. of 1861
Yeah.
66 or
I'm
67.
just choosing the same date as from Italian history. But all I'm saying is that there was a brief moment of liberalism, and then there was a reaction. It came from, as I said, romantics of various kinds. It came from Christian socialists, but it came first in England in the 1880s, then in the United States in the progressive era. All the while in Europe, as you know, there were stronger and stronger socialist parties, and they were against free markets. They believed there had to be planning to solve the problem of poverty. And of course, the actual solution to the problem of poverty was economic growth, not redistribution. There's an underlying theory that my friends on the left have, that every boss has gold in the back room, more or less infinite amounts of gold in the back room, and that the job of the trade unions or the state is to extract more of the gold and give the gold to the workers. And if that were true, I'd be all for it. And when I was a socialist, I believed it. But it's not true.
But have you been a socialist? Because I remember reading your stuff. So either you've been a socialist before you wrote, like I was,
of course,
between 16 and 23.
That's right. 20. That's right. That's right.
Oh, well, that's
when
okay.
I was a socialist.
We both belong to the, I think it was Bernard Shaw dictum. Or was that Russell? One of the two.
Here it goes. As someone who's someone who's not a socialist at 16 has no heart.
Right. I think
someone who's still a socialist at 25 has no brain.
No brain.
I choose the numbers to fit my case.
Good. I that fits mine as well, so that's fine.
Yeah, it fits. By the way, it's a very strong historical tendency in the 20th century.
Absolutely.
For people to move from socialism, not to conservatism necessarily, although some do, but to liberalism. And it happens over and over and over again.
It's also, given that we agree on this one, that it's also a good way of, how can I say, a measurement device of IQs.
Well, I don't know. I know an awful lot of I'm not making this up. I have dear friends who are socialists. I have
but you're not alone.
I have a dear friend named Jack Amarillo, who's a very creative and intelligent scholar. He's a Marxist economist. And Jack says to me, I hate the market. And I said, Jack, you don't hate the market. Your home is filled with antique furniture you've purchased on a market. And he says, I don't care. I hate the market.
Well, let's not get to talk about our rich socialist friends. Otherwise, we may become nasty.
Oh, he's not rich. He's a poor.
Well, if the home is filled with antique, then he's not poor either.
Well, yeah, but he's an American academic, so he earns a reasonable salary, but he's not rich.
By world standard, he's in the top 1% of the world income distribution.
That's right.
But anyhow, let's go back to our things, because the issue is you're describing what happens during the second part of the 19th and then in particular the 20th century.
Uh-huh.
And it seems to me that there are cultural and socioeconomic and technological changes taking place.
Yeah.
That progressively make the working of liberalism, of pure simple liberalism, as you described it, more and more complicated and difficult.
Why is that?
Which is what? Well, for example, let me start from the one I consider the most important. In fact, in the liberal discourse and in the liberal view of the way the collective decisions are taken,
mm-hmm.
There is the thing you mentioned before, something that you said. Open debate, freedom of speech, exchange, rational conversation, something like rational human beings cannot disagree forever, right? We all have the same evidence. We
are Bayesian, eventually we converge. And if we don't converge temporarily, we have to take a decision. We'll do it by majority after a rational conversation. Well, that requires a certain kind of social structure, a certain kind of distribution of knowledge and cognitive ability, and a certain willingness to debate, which is not uniformly distributed among humans. As the democratic process spread, it meant essentially giving active and passive power to a larger number of people, something called as the extension of the franchise.
Yeah.
It's not obvious to me that as we extended the franchise, I have nothing against that. I also consider that an irreversible process. But it's not obvious that by extending the franchise and extending the set of issues, because this happened simultaneously. As we extended the franchise, the set of issues and corners of life and society in which we started taking collective decision extended.
Yes. Unfortunately.
Well, at a certain point, there was a point, maybe there was an interval at which the assumption of rational debating among free humans collapsed.
Yeah.
And it's not just the internet. Everybody says, oh, the internet, the social. It's a bit more complicated than that.
Well, it's earlier.
And now I see very little of this rational discussion.
Well, I don't actually.
The liberal model of collective decision making seems to have collapsed as a description of what happens.
I don't actually agree. I certainly think I don't think that rational decision making was ever important in politics, alas. And take our own field of economics. I don't think economics runs on a rational basis, as I've said in an earlier trilogy on the rhetoric of economics. I think that academic economics, like all human institutions, is a mix of emotion and prior convictions and blind spots. And I'm not at all clear that mass decision making through the press or the internet is worse. Now, look, you've heard perhaps of this, or you have. I know you have this QAnon conspiracy theories.
Yeah,
which apparently 30% of the American public believes. Bizarre set of claims that the Democratic Party consists of child molesters and so on. Those things can spread, but they spread in all kinds of societies. The Great Fear, le Grand Peur in France after the French Revolution, the hysteria about witches, all of those are common, and it doesn't. There's hardly a bad. Now there's no bad idea in economics or not bad ideas. Let's confine our attention to those for a moment. There's no bad, evil, stupid idea in economics or politics or economics or politics that hasn't been proposed by some learned intellectual. It's just not the case. So I don't think handing over the polity to experts, most particularly economic experts, has been a good experiment.
I didn't say that.
It's implied by what you said.
No, it's not. Because what I did was to suggest that there is an issue. The fact that there is an issue doesn't imply that,
There's always been an issue. I'm a historian, and I'm constantly finding people thinking that something that happened just now is the first time it's ever happened in the world. And I think you'll agree with me that that's not so, that there is no new thing under the sun, as Ecclesiastes says. And that's right. So there isn't look, in our own field of economics in the last century, economists have become more and more arrogant about their version of social engineering. And it started with A.C. Pigou, as I mentioned, but you can also see it in the socialist movement earlier. And the idea is that you hand the economy over to the Council of Economic Advisors and then
They know what to do. Yeah, I wrote abundantly against that. So that you don't have to convince me that that's not the solution.
Good, but you really have to convince your audience, because a lot of people believe that economists are magic, that they have this deep knowledge of the future, which, as lots of economists, including Coase, have pointed out, you can't have.
Okay, that part we agree. So I'm not gonna. The solution is certainly not to select the expert, among other things, because who selects the expert? Who decides who the experts are? Who
Quis
delegates?
custodiet ipsos custodies.
Right, and so we're quite aware, at least in this gang, of that problem. On the other hand, while it is true that there is nothing particularly new in phenomenal populism, it's also true that they take interesting new forms.
Yeah.
And that's what we wants to understand. There is no doubt that when I look at political debate, both in the US and Italy, or France and Spain for that matter, I mean, the countries I know, or the UK, liberal democracies by definition, the best that there is, it's hardly modelable in the way I would model the same debate in the 50s or 60s. Right?
Yeah, that's true. But there was this brief period of agreement that the elites would run things, and people were content on the whole with that. Some people weren't, but mostly they were.
But is it an elite even now, Deirdre? It's just a different elite. In fact, that's the issue. The issue is the way, which is completely absent from liberalism, which is the way in which elites get self-selected. I don't need to quote the authors to you. You know Mosca and Pareto and so on as well as I do, and probably better.
Yeah, I've read Mosca.
But the issue is that we observe this changing of elites of their relation with the rest of the people, and that doesn't really fit well with the model of political liberalism that I get from.
Well, I agree. That is, I think they, as Mosca and Pareto said, there is this tendency to irrationalism in politics, but again, I would say that was true of Rome or 17th century England or whatever, I do, there was this great fear of mass communication in the early 20th century. Eventually, the invention of the radio and so forth greatly strengthened the delivery of propaganda, and we got Mussolini and Hitler and Stalin on the radio. But
Franklin Delano Roosevelt as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that had its mainly bad side, but also its good side. But it's a mistake to think that this never happened before. The invention of the printing press had a very large effect in Europe of making bad ideas and good ideas circulate faster.
Marco, I have
taken over too many. Do you want to? What's your view on that? On the issue of populism against liberalism, which, by the way, is a title of a famous book by a teacher of mine, Riker, and I invite our young audience to take a look at it. I don't know if it is translated in Italy, but
he was a great scholar.
Actually, no, it's Liberalism Against Populism. The title.
He was I hope you accept my praise for him. He was a great scholar.
He was, and he was also a great man, a very interesting Bill Riker.
That I didn't even meet him.
Well, he was at Rochester. He was at the floor.
Yeah,
he was a friend of my advisor who was Lionel Mackenzie. So
right.
I had the good luck of being told by Mackenzie, go upstairs, take some classes from Riker.
Yeah.
And so that was... so there is this issue, in my view, which is unresolved, right? There is a view of liberalism, political functioning, and there is a view of elite populism and changing elite, which run to the contrary. And it's unclear to me in what sense the models we propose as liberals may actually allow us to operate in the world that we are today.
But we propose them not because they'll win automatically as soon as we propose them, but because they have to be the center of our preaching. Now, if we don't persuade people, that's too bad. We have to do a good job in persuading them. But
so you are a theorist. You believe it's a matter of preaching.
Of course it is. There isn't any government plan that we can introduce to make liberalism more popular. We have to.
I think it's a collateral effect. The populism and so on, more or less collateral effect of the transient when things are changing. Things are constantly changing. The Industrial Revolution brought some stress into the society. All the technology and the way the human society is organized continuously changes, and this introduces stresses that usually, how can I say, absorbed. They are usually balanced, or how can I say? I can't find a better word.
Well,
usually compensated by these collateral effects.
Yeah,
and when there's a protest, when there's a tension, this tension usually is relaxed through populism and so on, which bring themselves some problems. But getting back to what we were discussing earlier, I think that Illuminism brought sort of a different perspective to human being. That we have the growth of wealth because people started having more. The technological improvement of the 17th, 18th century is the fact that the human being had more faith in his own capacity of predicting the future, predicting how a mechanism was built, and could help his life to be better, to be more productive. But this also required a cooperation in the sense of industrial cooperation. It's being faithful on our own and being able of improving. In fact, in the Renaissance, where there was more, and also in the past, there was this faith on himself and the human being, but actually only on a smaller portion of the human society. Whereas in the 18th century, they started spreading across the entire. And statistics is telling you that the people with the higher QI, which are more or less spread across the entire population, will have more probability of introducing improvement in the society. And for this, having a widespread and more, the society was leveraging its best QI people.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, but I partly don't agree with it. And
which part you don't agree? Because I tend to find more and more empirical historical evidence that this model that Marco has roughly described is a pretty good way of rendering.
No, it's not. And here's why. Here's why. There are two sides to the Enlightenment.
There are two sides
to the Enlightenment.
Okay.
And it's not back to the Quattrocento that's at issue here. It's the 18th century.
Yes.
And there are two sides to the Enlightenment. There's the reason side, and there's the liberty side. And the reason side said, as Thomas Paine did in a pamphlet, a famous pamphlet he wrote in 1775 called Common Sense, we have the power to build the world again. And that's top down. We have the power because now we have reason on our side, and we will organize things in a massive, correct way. That's the reason side. It's what went wrong in the early French Revolution. It's what's wrong with central planning socialism. But the other side was Scottish, not French, more. And it was the liberty side. That if you leave people alone, they'll, through these spontaneous orders of the marketplace or language or friendship, they'll improve themselves. If you try to plan them from above, it won't work. And that's what Adam Smith
I partially agree.
Well, I'm sure you
partially agree, but
we should entirely agree.
But it's one thing is
the reason side didn't work. What works is and it's not high IQ people that's an issue here.
I partially agree.
In what sense it's not high IQ people that it's an issue? It says you agree that it's the smart fraction, the pools, or you think it's not true?
It's not true. It's not high IQ people who make an economy work. That's the reason idea.
No. I think this is not the point. I mean, you can have faith in your. You can have faith in your capacity of understanding how the world how the world works. Okay, our galaxy works. For instance, in the 18th century, we're thinking that the sun was working a completely different way.
Right.
The fact that the theory is wrong, it doesn't mean that the model you are applying, which is an iterative model in which every interaction has a better model, will work. So the model is working, the current theory doesn't work. So the current social theory, which is saying you should use socialist, you should have a planned economy, which is not working because the model is wrong. But the approach of being able to decide yourself and formulate a new theory, which is the freedom theory, because it's a dynamic system in which you can't have a planned, because you can't plan. It's chaos. If you study a theory of chaos, you can't plan theory of chaos because sooner or later the system will diverge from your prediction.
Yeah, well, I've had some interest in chaos theory, and decided in the end that it was hopeless as a social theory. But what is clear, I think, is that the future is unpredictable, and that to engage in social engineering on anything other than broad constitutional principles, and only a few of those, is a fool's errand, as we say in English. There must be an Italian proverb to the same effect. It's not going to work, and it never has. And here's one of the basic reasons it doesn't work. If economists or political scientists were so smart, they would be rich. It's as simple as that. If an economist proposes that she can lay down the future with the
Yeah, no, but I don't think that that's what Marco is saying, or at least that's not my reading of that. It's
No,
not
no,
a
I'm
matter
not saying
of,
it's what he's saying. I'm saying it's what I say.
Okay.
fine, but that's not an answer.
I think that's one of the basic problems with social engineering. Social engineering is the
Let's try
reason
again,
why
because this is going. This I think it's next to the crux of the matter,
Yeah.
and it's we're talking cross purposes. The issue is not about social engineering, even if one has to recognize that there is a plentiful social engineering going on, for good or for bad, and that everybody advocates some of it, including you.
Yeah.
When you say, well, including you, me, or anybody, right? I mean, when people say, I want to reduce the size of the state,
Yeah.
because they are actually proposing a certain form of social engineering.
Yeah.
They're saying, well, we should eliminate this agency and the other. We should eliminate this regulation because they're not good. Without those, we'll do better. And that's completely equivalent from at least a logical point of view to people to say, no, we should actually add another agency.
Yeah, but it's not equivalent from a historical point of view. It is equivalent from a logical point of view. Going up or down doesn't matter from the point of view of theory. I agree. But going down, going back to small states that we once had, would improve things. I think you've persuaded me that the system of patents and copyrights is completely corrupt and needs to be abolished, among hundreds of other statist policies. It's not. Of course, it's not.
This is a debate. I have to play a certain role. You cannot be telling me, "Oh, Boldrin, you're the one that has been insisting that we should abolish patents." I agree.
Well, but I don't. A debate doesn't have to take the form of people opposing each other, dear. I don't know.
This I follow, Deirdre. You know that. I follow the old Ken Arrow rule. A conversation among intelligent people, especially if it is meant to transmit, to make other people listening to them thinking, has to concentrate on what they disagree, because the part where they agree, it's boring. They keep telling each other, I agree. Oh, no, I agree. No, I agree. You agree.
Well, but I admired Ken.
Violently agree.
Ken had this I had the luck of interacting with the guy for many years, between 86 and 96 a lot. And he was a bit, I have to say that after a while, for a person of low IQ like me, it was a bit unsettling, because the guy would go at the speed of light and force you continuously to try to catch up. But as a general rule for public debate, I think it's useful. Also because I actually think there is a real issue here. It's not a matter of just debating for the pleasure of debating. Just there is a real issue. And the issue is, let me rephrase it, not so much that one say there are some smart expert that knows what to do. I'm totally opposed to that idea. And I think it's one of the danger of the current period. And
Kenneth Arrow, by the way, was not opposed to that.
What?
Kenneth Arrow was not opposed to that.
I agree. Ken had mixed feelings. Well,
brother-in-law, Paul Samuelson, were statists. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, overall, I would say that Ken had the temptation of often to say, "Let the expert take care because we know better." Yeah. I agree. Even if it wasn't that. But anyhow, it's one of the great dangers of the current period we live, which is this current. You need Sunstein and all the nudging people, and that's exactly the risk I think the liberalism is facing.
I hate them, or I hate their ideas. I love Bob Frank, who's a wonderful economist.
I hate the idea and I hate the practice of it, given this. We live it in the departments and in the universities daily. But let's not get into that. Let me go to the issue that is there, that we need to understand better and find an answer. Problems are getting more and more complex. The extent to which social control is being exercised, for good or for bad, from private companies or states is growing, respect historical standards, and there is a degree of expertise that, for good or for bad, is required to handle the mechanism from artificial intelligence. No, you cannot say no. It's a fact. Neither you nor I can today sit in front of an artificial. Hold it. Neither you nor I, for prepared that we are, can handle the kind of artificial intelligence with which YouTube tomorrow will be spreading or not spreading this view of this video of us. Okay?
No, that's wrong.
What do you mean it's wrong? It's a fact.
I'm sorry to be so so disagreeable, but
it's okay. But it's simply you're disagreeing on a fact.
It's not a thing. Here's the axiom that you're employing, and it's a commonplace in the modern world. A complex modern economy needs complex regulation.
I didn't say it needs. I said it has. It doesn't mean it needs.
Oh well, but then then you needn't talk about artificial intelligence or this or the other. It's
there, Deirdre.
What?
It's there.
That it's there. It's there in the minds of people. I was speaking to my cousin, who works for the CIA. We think that Annie. We're not sure what she does, but we think she's probably in charge of all the spies in Europe. We're not altogether clear what it is she does, of course. And I was talking to her, and I said, well, markets can do this. And she said, she brought out this very widespread opinion by ordinary people, she's not an economist, that a complicated modern economy requires complex regulation. And as you know, as economists, it's the other way around. The more complicated an economy is, or a language, the less it requires regulation. It's got to go on its own. The Italian language is very complex. I've tried to learn it.
Fine.
And have
You're not letting me finish, because that's not where I'm going. I was describing you a matter of fact.
What's a matter of fact?
The matter of fact is that, as a matter of fact, we live in societies that, for good or for bad, for the wrong reason or the right reason, are technologically and scientifically more complex than in the past, and are de facto more regulated than in the past. I'm not saying I like it or I hate it. I actually do hate it, but that's my personal view. I'm just sticking to the fact.
Well, of course, it's a fact. It's a fact.
Hold it.
People want statism. They want statism because it makes them feel secure.
No, you have to be patient for a second. So once we accept that fact, we also have to recognize the second fact. To dismantle or to increase the regulation, to use or not to use this instrument, has become more demanding. The degree of specialization of you, me, Marco, and whoever has increased. While 30 years ago, 40 years ago, beginning of my career, I could write code to run little simulation at the top of the business at the time. Okay. Yeah. Right now, I can't. And not only because I've become 66 and no longer 30, but also because the degree of specialization in that stuff is it's a lot more than what I could keep up with. I could keep up with that, but I wouldn't keep up with history or other stuff. That's right. I chose to keep up with history, and I lost the programming.
So that's specialization there.
Right. But it's part of the process, and we recognize it's there. The degree of specialization that is increasing, though, is creating an hiatus, again, third fact, between what people call in the literature the smart fraction and the rest. Again, so maybe you don't accept the idea that there is a smart fraction, that there is a sector of society that is becoming educated, specialized, handle complex mechanisms, and that there is, and the distance, the cognitive distance between this fraction could be 10%, 15%, but certainly no more than 25% of the population, and the rest is very large. The distance between the knowledges of Charles the Great and the lust of his peasants was a lot shorter than the distance between your cousin knowledge and somebody in the Ozark.
Yeah, but I
And
don't.
that's where I find problematic.
Well, I don't think it's a problem. I
There,
think it's
one final consideration. Then I have to. I got a family on the other side who's a little bit complaining. But final consideration on this. Let's pick an example. Maybe I misunderstood what because I don't have the skill set and the set of intellectual tools to deal with this. But let's consider. It seems to me that what you're saying is that the best model is always the free model, the model in which you're free to do. Liberalism means that you are free to do everything.
usually.
Let's consider something like trading among countries. And if you have foreign countries which is different model compared to free trading, they are using, for instance, unfair practices like dumping, like or stealing your technology or things like that. In this case, it is not the best model. So there are limits, and the free model is not always the best model you should apply because they will be.
That's the Chinese argument.
It's one of the arguments. It's not only it. Yeah,
and it's wrong. I mean, as I say, you both have, I must say, somewhat conventional opinions about these things. China is not a threat to anyone. It's a threat in politics. It's a threat in war, and that we should take very seriously.
No, wait. This is the opinion about China is Marco's, not mine. I am on the records in Italy for saying exactly the opposite. Fact, China is not a threat.
I was not mentioning China. In fact,
what did you mention?
It was not. Imagine two small countries which are trading each other, and they are. One of the two is playing unfairly to the other. I'm not focusing on. I'm trying to do an abstraction of what we are saying rather than focusing on a specific case.
Okay. But in the abstraction, if someone wants to subsidize their exports to me, that's fine with me. It doesn't matter. Go ahead, subsidize them. It's a gift from country B to country A. There's no contradiction there. It's countries don't get rich through mercantilism. They don't get rich by having the most exports. That's not how they do it. They get rich by being more clever in investing arrangements. So, and if people steal your technology, that's good for the world. It may be too bad for you. They steal your patents and your trade secrets, but for the world is better off. The more people who know how to make lasagna correctly, and there are very few people who do, that's best. I mean, that's the theoretical argument.
She cannot see us, so she's not seeing me that I raise my hand and say, hey, I can make good lasagnas.
Well, my mother learned from an Italian when she lived in Italy for a year how to make it. And her lasagna was so good that I can't order lasagna in a restaurant.
Even in Italy?
Even in Italy. One place in of all places. There is one place in of all places, Venice, which, as you know, is not famous for its cuisine, which made lasagna as
what
good.
What did you say? Venice is not famous for its cuisine? I gotta take you to Venice later.
Venice has been cheating foreigners for 5
years. You're talking about the Centro Storico, the city of Venice.
Why do they need to make?
No. Then you're talking about the touristic part. Yeah, in the touristic part, it's impossible to eat decently unless you go to 3-4 places.
I've been to Harry's
Same in Rome.
Harry's Bar is a trap for silly Americans.
Is a disaster.
Harry's Bar is the trap for silly Americans. But if you come with me, not only you pay a third, but you actually eat well.
I know. Well, look, invite me to your country, and I'll come. I go to Italy every chance I get.
Well,
And
I'm
for
pretty
example,
sure
I've been to
next March
Bologna
we'll go
5 or 6 times. I've been to Bologna 5 or 6 times, and miraculously, I've never had a good meal in Bologna. Now, perché?
Because you're
What's
too
going
American.
on here?
You see, that's one aspect of the Italian. You call it anarchist. Ciao, Marco. Marco has to go.
Guys,
Ciao, Marco.
Okay.
it was really a
Thank
pleasure.
you very much, Marco.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you so much for this evening. Cheers.
That's the problem with the touristic places in Italy. You see,
Yeah,
they see the Americans and they say, "Well, what the hell?"
Yeah.
And that's the anarchists. The no respect to the rules.
At Harry's Bar, they overcooked the spaghetti. Can you imagine that?
Harry's Bar, they do terrible things unless you speak to them in Venetian, and then there is a story. There is a beautiful story. You probably know David Levine is my co-author and the game theorist, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever met him, but you know probably who is.
Yeah.
So David never believed that when we were in the early 20s, I could eat at Harry's Bar at a 10% price. It was as cheap as eating pizza, and this was because for a series of connection. First of all, Arrigo at the time was a leftist. It was about the party, so if you were known within the party circles, he would let you discount. And then there were two dear friends. One of them, our spectators know, it's Adriano Palma, that were related to Arrigo by family thing. And so there was a small group of us that essentially had this discount. He knew that. And so I told this story. So David said, "Oh, you're a bullshitter." I said, "Trust me, you just speak." In any case, I said, 10% no, but if we go now, I'll get 50% discount minimum just by speaking Venetian.
Sure.
But no, that's impossible. So I remember it was 1999. We're in Venice because we're going to CDP in Trieste, the Institute for the Center for Theoretical Physics, and we spent a couple of days in Venice, so a show in Venice.
Sure.
And he comes up with this thing, says, oh, let's check your bullshitting about Harry. Let's go. Well, it was beautiful because we did it. And at some point I had to hide because the deal was that Cipriani was not supposed to see me. So the waiters had to give me the discount just because I spoke Venetian. And the deal was, David, you just shut up because you look so American. Just don't move the tongue ever when they're next to us. Man, we paid 40%.
Well,
the final bill that came was beautiful. It was all the discounts, and then there was Voce Amica. We actually got it in fiscal.
Voce Amica.
Voce Amica, friendly voice.
Of course.
And it was still in lire. And I remember Voce Amica was minus 56,000 liras, over and above what he had already discounted. Wow. So it was Venice is as a Levantine culture in which locals versus, I can tell you beautiful stories about that.
Sure.
And so it's completely crazy. But anyhow, going back to the try to finish. You are very optimistic, much more than me.
I am.
So that's good. But
you do not change gender if you're not optimistic. Also, if you don't have a sense.
Wait, lady. The implication here. Let's get that implication arrow correctly.
You should. If you're going to change gender, there are two things you need.
Okay, changing gender means being optimistic, but not vice versa. You have
to be an optimist, and you have to have a good sense of humor, or you're going to be miserable.
I think I have both. I hope that's why I was asking. That's why I was asking if you're implying that the arrow of implication goes both sides, because then I'm screwed.
Don't tell your wife.
And don't worry about. Don't worry about. Actually, my current companion. We were out at dinner with her in Salamanca 10 years ago.
Oh yeah, God, that was fun.
Yeah, that was fun. Listen, I think we gave the message. We've been talking, and it's so kids, people, not only kids. I mean, they're younger than probably half of us, but not so young. Some. You got the books, you got the titles. What Deirdre write is interesting, and yes, we do have a different evaluation about the optimism if liberalism is good enough in front of the issue of power. But that's advertising me for my forthcoming production on the topic.
I don't see the alternative. Maybe your book who show me an alternative.
Oh, no, but you see, I belong to that crowd that believes that we can go in steps. No, I don't see the alternative either. If somebody has to ask me today, well, what do you think is the most viable, like Churchill,
Sure.
Everything else is worse, I say for sure, liberalism.
Sure.
Point is that I also see difficulties in, for example, I don't want to make it too long. One of the issues that troubles me is global warming.
Yeah. Well,
how do we handle global warming with liberal decision-making procedures?
I probably have somewhat the same opinions. I think it's a serious problem. I think it's got to be handled, but there are liberal ways of doing it. And I
don't think we're doing it in a liberal way. So we are a liberal society that is producing a non-liberal way.
Except it's not a liberal society. But if we just had a tax on carbon, and in any case, what's going to actually solve it is innovation. And when we start to understand, and most
we agree on that too, but that's not what we have convinced people.
No, you're absolutely right. They think it's, I don't know, investment or moonshots or something. That's one thing.
Or prohibition, or forcing you to do things you wouldn't do, or
that's right.
Forcing you to change your car.
Whereas if the experiments in Iceland, which has ample power in capturing carbon from the atmosphere, work, that may solve it. We may be able to tune the atmosphere. And there are lots of other possibilities. But I don't know. If I was so smart, I'd be rich. But I think that the economic history since 1800 shows that innovation is the great solution, and that innovation comes from liberalism. That's the change.
On this, we completely agree, Deirdre. The little bit that I've written, it's all about that.
Well, good.
And that liberalism is not liberalism without competition, which, by the way, opens up another issue, but we're not going to debate it today because we've been here for 2 hours, which is competition is not a natural state.
Well, it's a natural state if you don't have K Street. I mean, I'm a member.
What happened to your camera?
Well, I hold the Isaiah Berlin Chair in Liberal Thought at the Cato Institute. And 1 block from the Cato Institute is K Street, where all the lobbyists operate. And Cato is against the lobbyists. And if we could just close down K Street, which would mean changing the Constitution, we would be in much better shape.
Yes, but something happened. Your camera disappeared. Decided not to show you. You must have touched something.
Maybe I touched something. I don't know.
Well, but we were. Well, it's not. Well, I don't know. At present, I can't fix it. It's okay. They saw you until now. Listen, I hope to see you at Cato. When are you going to be at Cato? So I'll try to get it
in 2 months. October, November, and then again in the spring for a month.
Well, I will try to show up, and maybe we'll continue this conversation.
I would be thrilled. There's an excellent restaurant named Tiramisu, not too far from Cato, an Italian place that I'll take you to.
We'll go to Tiramisu.
See.
Thanks for joining us.
Okay, dear. Arrivederci.
Arrivederci. Ciao.
Ciao bambino, un bacio ancora.
Ciao bambina, un bacio ancora. Grandissima.
Sì.
Grandissima Deirdre. Grandissima.
Ok, dear.
Ciao bella, grazie. Ciao a tutti. Ciao. All right, gioventù. Va bene. Back to Italian. Dove trovate conversazioni a sto livello? La signora era Deirdre McCloskey. Se non sapete chi era, andate su Wikipedia e scoprite. Così. Vi racconterò come cazzo è il tiramisù a Washington DC vicino a Cato Institute. Samuele, non ti preoccupare, verrà ricaricata sul mio canale fra un paio di giorni perché
perché, cosa volevo dire? Perché c'è parecchia roba dalle elezioni che voglio caricare lentamente, altrimenti si intasa, e quindi la ricarico fra un paio. La conosco da moltissimo, la conosco da quando si chiamava Donald McCloskey, ed era un ampio signore, qualche anno più di me, parecchi, insomma abbastanza popolato, e con una grande beer belly, e faceva storia economica a Iowa. Quindi sì, la conosco da un tot, più precisamente dal 1986 o 7, credo, una roba del genere, sì. Va bene, che dire, basta? Ma ho detto sì, una cosa che intendo fare adesso. Samuele, ci sentiamo io e te, se hai un attimo, metto qua, chiudo la comunicazione, metto qua, ti mando il link di questa stanza e parliamo per la sigla, vediamo come trovare la soluzione. Sulle elezioni commenterò un'altra volta. All'inizio volevo parlare di questo, poi mi sono collegato tardi e avevo l'appuntamento con Deirdre alle 2:15, e quindi va bene, scrivimi, ci sentiamo, Samuele, non ti preoccupare. E quindi una chiacchierata sulle elezioni la faremo dopo. Adesso mi fermo perché sono 2 ore che chiacchieriamo, quindi direi per oggi basta così. Mi riprometto, cosa che non ho fatto, di invitare nei settimane, mesi che verranno altri amici più o meno divertenti, alcuni molto amici, altri meno amici, che, diciamo così, dal vostro punto di vista sono economisti famosi, per farci 2 chiacchiere in libertà sulla loro ricerca. Vediamo. No, non ci sarà alcuna Grecia 2.0, non c'è alcuna Grecia 2.0 perché mi sembra che su questo, come avevo detto, Boldrin non è proprio sempre stupido. Come avevo detto, Giorgia è molto più reliable dei chiacchieroni della Lega, e quindi farà una legge di bilancio molto più ragionevole di quello che tutti temono. Ma su questo c'è una riflessione politica da fare più seria, ma la facciamo la prossima volta. All right, Draghi ospite, magari vedremo, perché no, quando è libero, ma adesso mi pare che abbia ancora dei mesi complicati davanti. All right. Bene, buona serata a tutti, sono le 11 in Italia, andate a farvi una camomilla. Ciao ciao. Ciao 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 ciao.